he was running on, let's make a deal with Vladimir Putin, let's be friends with Russia. But once the media is saying, oh, you're a Russian spy,
right.
Well, now you can't really make a deal with Vladimir Putin because then, look, proof. He was a Russian spy. So they kind of boxed him in. I think they manipulated him, and they lied to him about a lot of the stuff. I mean, there were articles written about how they had misled him about the number of troops still remaining in Syria when he wanted to end that war several different times. I think that it seemed like they really convinced him that Assad had been gassing his own people, and that convinced Trump to bomb Syria a couple times. I don't know exactly what the conversations were like. I do know that if he really wanted to be the guy who was ending all of the wars, and he wanted to be the guy who wasn't giving into the military-industrial complex, it makes no sense for him to have people like Lindsey Graham in his ear. It made no sense for him to make Mike Pompeo his Secretary of State. It made no sense to have these guys like Mattis and like he put the war party into all of these positions, and then he's like, "Wait, man, they're undermining me at every turn." And you're like, "Well, yeah, you should have put better people in."
Before you get into office. And this is like we were talking about this last night. That like if you could sit down with Trump, what would be one of the first things you would ask him? What I would ask is like, first of all, what did you think it was going to be like, and what was it like when you get into office? How much research do you need to do on each individual to find out where their ties are, and like, how do you know who to put in what position?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. And like, at what point do you realize, like at what point did Trump figure out, like, oh, okay,
right,
these guys are kind of working against me.
Yeah.
Like my own deep state is kind of my own intelligence agencies who are supposed to work for me are actually working to undermine me, which they clearly are, and many have admitted at this point that they were. That I'd be really interested to hear what he has to say about
there's no better evidence than was it 51 intelligence officials that signed off on the fact that the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation?
Yes, I believe including 4 former heads of the CIA. And it's really something because there's no like demand for accountability for those people. Yeah. Like, hey, explain yourself, like how did you sign off on this? Blatant election interference, and it's one of these things like, this is why when the Trump supporters who say that they stole the election, believe that the election machines were rigged or that there was ballot stuffing, it's like, even if they're not right about that, which I don't know, I mean, I've never seen compelling evidence that is the case, but it's kind of like, I use the example of like, if you were like, if you're cheating on your wife, and then she's like, like you're cheating on her, and then she's like, I know Friday when you were out, I know you were cheating on me, and you weren't that Friday cheating on her. Like, even though she's wrong, she's really right. Like, she might be wrong about that specific day, but she knows you're like they know this whole thing is illegitimate. Like, you stole it, and they really did. They really did. I mean, they suppressed the October bombshell that would have very likely tipped the election in Trump's favor.
Yeah.
And tried to make it seem again that Russia was, stealing our elections, which is another major factor in the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict. That, first of all, what an insane provocation of Russia it was for the last 6 years to have not just people in the corporate press, but like the former head of the CIA, like on TV every day saying Russia attacked our democracy. They interfered in our election and then also claiming that they were in a partnership with Donald Trump to steal it from Hillary Clinton. And I heard senators and congressmen and every media pundit, people from the FBI, the CIA, constantly saying on TV that this was an act of war by Russia. That they would say it's worse than Pearl Harbor, what they did. And so if you're, from the Russian perspective, you're sitting there and you see the most war-hungry country in the world, the country that in the last 20 years has fought 7 wars, led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, destroyed nations, and they're out there saying, you just committed an act of war against us. I mean, like, that's quite an aggressive posture, particularly when they all knew it was bullshit. They all knew from the very beginning. And so you had all of that, and then they tried to do it again in 2020, claimed this was a Russian operation to interfere in the election. And meanwhile, all of it was actually a U.S. intelligence agency's operation to interfere in the election, just from the other side.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy that this is not a mainstream narrative and that the news ignores this. They also ignore during the debates when Joe Biden was saying that, my son didn't make any money over there and I have nothing to do with my son's business. Like, it's all lies. It's all easily proven, and there's nothing.
Yeah. And of course, if Trump, the moderator doesn't push back during that debate and say, excuse me, Mr. Biden, that's just not true.
Right.
Like, we know there's no pushback on that. They just let him get away with it. And he gets to stand up there and say, hey, look, all of these intelligence officials, they tell them they're backing up my story, that this laptop is Russian disinformation. And I don't know exactly what it is now, but I remember there were they had like opinion polls on this after the Mueller investigation. And it's still an enormously high percentage of Democratic voters believe that Trump and Russia were Trump and Putin were involved in a conspiracy to steal the election. They still believe it to this day because they heard Trump-Russia collusion every day nonstop. And that is a huge part of why they support this war.